say wanted to hear your friend, Mr. Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as the proud Minister of Tourism, Economic Development and Investment in this Gaston Brown's administration, and as a humble minister in our government, it is with confidence that I say, Mr. Speaker, to all the members of this honorable House, to the citizens and to the residents of this country, that what the government is seeking to amend the Investment Authority Act of 2017 today, we are seeking to protect the interests of the people of Antigua and Barbuda, which must always be of paramount importance. The government and our Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, deserves unreserved congratulations for its vision, for its foresight, in always working in the best interests of the people of this country. And I am proud to be a part of this government. So under the proposed amendment, Mr. Speaker, hotels must follow a specific protocol and issue timely notice of temporary notice. That is what the amendment says. The Investment Authority Bill, the key word is timely notice, of temporary closure. And if they fail, Mr. Speaker, to do so, it may, not must, not will, and the Attorney General is very careful with his legal support team to put in the word may, and he explained that today, result into suspension of concessions by the government to failure to follow the law. In other words, Mr. Speaker, it is not mandatory, and solely it is by the discretion of the government if the need arises. It is not mandatory, it is not punitive. What is the rationale for this amendment? We've heard a lot of boulala today about it's going to be punitive and unnecessary and vindictive and is to get after retaliatory. So let me give a little background of the rationale and the thinking of the Prime Minister and his cabinet. Mr. Speaker, we all know that tourism is the lifeblood of our nation. And this is not just a mere cliche, sir, but it is a declaration that's founded in fact. It is not a cliche. We have no natural resources in this country, none, except, sir, the God-given beauty of our land, our sea, our warm and friendly, God-fearing people. That is what we have. That is our greatest asset. That is the human capital and the patrimony that must be protected in this country at all times. And that is what the Gaston Brown-led administration is seeking to do here today in these hallowed halls of this house. Tourism for us, man, is what oil is for Saudi Arabia, for Kuwait, for Nigeria, and we know for Venezuela, what bauxite means for Jamaica, and what gold means for Guyana. Tourism is our oil in this country. What diamonds are for Botswana. So, sir, we must always, therefore, protect this critical industry at all cost. At all costs. Mr. Speaker, it is estimated that the tourism sector provides revenues of approximately United States $750 million to this country, and is responsible for 50% of all investment, 70% of our gross domestic product. So our success as a nation, this is not about the Labour Party or DNA or UPP. This is about the nation that relies on the success of tourism. So when you have an irresponsible wannabe like Harold Lovell, who wants to tear down at all costs just to gain political power in this country and speak about arrivals being down and preaching gloom and doom and giving the international community that we're in a crisis. We're in crisis mode in the tourism industry in this country. Why? Because we have an overall decline of 5%. We have had Brexit, we have had a weak Canadian dollar. But they compared it to a record exceptional year, and Alex de Brito told them that. He was interviewed on Serpent's program, and he said, you cannot, it is not fair to compare the arrival figures up to June of this year to 2016. That was an exceptional year, the best year in 7 years in tourism in this country. And I challenge Mr. Lovell, even with the numbers being down this year, we are still ahead of any best year that he presided over as Minister of Tourism in this country. He was a total failure. Failure tourism, failure finance, made Habib collapse. We had to rescue the depositors' bodies. So, Mr. Speaker, in other words, where goes tourism, there goes our nation. And as the CTO's General Secretary, Mr. Hugh Riley, said earlier this year about our region, and I crave your indulgence to quote, we are the world's most tourism-dependent region, and we must care more than anyone else. No one should pay more attention to delivering a superb experience than we in the Caribbean, end of quote. So, sir, the amendment to the Investment Authority Act is indeed tangible and concrete demonstration that our government, that this Gaston Brown administration, that we care more than anyone about not just our visitors, who we welcome and love every single day, but also that we care about the employees. In fact, sir, 51% of all the workers in this country, all are directly or indirectly employed in the tourism industry. Did you know that? 51%. So the amendment to this bill clearly shows that we care, not just about the workers, which are the most important, but also about the local suppliers who provide critical services to our hotels, the taxi driver, the vendors, the water sports operator, and also the international tour operators who send their guests to Antigua and Barbuda as a preferred destination. So, Mr. Speaker, indeed, not just for Antigua and Barbuda, but tourism on average now accounts for a significant percentage of the gross domestic product of all CARICOM countries taken as a whole. So greater demands are made on the tourism sector throughout CARICOM to deliver employment, revenues, and foreign exchange, the critical foreign exchange. Tourism is the largest earner of foreign exchange in CARICOM, especially the OECS countries, probably except for Trinidad and Tobago, and maybe Guyana. But all the other countries, Jamaica, Bahamas, Barbados, St. Lucia. So, Mr. Speaker, this amendment will no doubt, it will reverberate, mark my word, among OECS countries and other CARICOM countries, and may well become a standard to be emulated throughout the region. We are always the first, this Gaston Brown administration, in always seeking to come to this House and pass legislation to be at the front. And others will follow just with the issuance, the same issuance of the diplomatic passports and the policy that other CARICOM countries have commended our Prime Minister for so doing, and now are seeking to emulate our policy on the issuance of diplomatic and official passports. So this amendment is important in that it protects all the stakeholders in the tourism industry, and it shows that we are all equal partners. It's not just about the hotel and the owners of the hotel, but it's about all the stakeholders, the government, the union, the workers, the vendors, the water sport operators, the tour operators. So it will not harm hotels like what they're putting out there, like what the chairman of the UPP, Giselle Isaac, I don't know which seat she's running. She's running from 110X, but I know for sure she's running away completely. She's headlines of Observer that's going to harm hotels. It will not harm hotels. It will offer, sir, protection to all of the stakeholders. So, sir, get into the specifics of the bill. This bill speaks to the hotels who have 3% of the country's total room stock. And I will read the section where it says, Mr. Speaker. Section 3, subsection 2, the proprietor of any hotel or group of hotels having a 3% or more of the total room occupancy or stock in Antigua and Barbuda who intends to A, carry on business for less than 10 months, or B, close down temporarily for a period of 2 months or more. Now, sir, let me respond briefly to the leader of the opposition. I know he's not here, but who may not be able to calculate this 3% of our approximately 3,000 rooms, Mr. Speaker. I know my good friend, the member for St. John's Rural West, always had a counting problem, and he still has. But it's a simple arithmetic, sir. Very basic. He should know, as the former Prime Minister, that we have 3,000 saleable rooms, and 3% of 3,000 is 90 rooms, sir, or more. So it will affect hotels that has 90 rooms or more, such as Blue Waters, Jolly Beach, Carlisle Bay, St. James's, etc. Can't he? Isn't that basic? And he's making a big deal about that. This means also that it will in no way be punitive to any of the properties. That's not what we're seeking to do. And also, it will not affect our small hoteliers. In fact, it is seeking to ensure that there's proper consultation. That's all what we're asking for. Consultation. We're not saying you cannot close for 2 months if you need to do it. But there must be dialogue with the largest stakeholder in the country, is the government. Show some respect, man. And decency, common courtesy, like what the Honorable Prime Minister said. Then Mrs. Halford and Mr. Rob Sherman invited him to lunch. And then subsequently they came to my office. They gave the Prime Minister the first courtesy, and then the second courtesy as the Minister of Tourism, and informed me. They asked for concessions, we took it to Cabinet, and we granted them the concessions. That is common decency, and that's all what we are seeking for. Common decency and proper and adequate notice and consultation whenever major renovations or refurbishments are planned that will have an impact on our country. We cannot have a situation, Mr. Speaker, where hotels close willy-nilly for long extended periods with no prior consultation at all. That is unacceptable. And this is particularly so when the government has given so much by way of concessions to ensure that hotels are profitable and can remain competitive. Mr. Speaker, this government has demonstrated over the years by its track record that we are investor-friendly. In fact, we've been accused of being too investor-friendly. If you listened carefully to the member for All Saints East and St. Luke, she says we'll give away everything. What is in it for the country? And you give them all these concessions and they pay no taxes. So is she saying that when or if she ever was able to form a government, which is virtually impossible, that she will not give concessions to hotels? Is it that she's saying? Excuse me. So we have demonstrated, we have a track record of being investor-friendly. Nobody can accuse this Gaston Brown administration of not giving concessions. And please permit me just to list, just briefly, some of the few generous concessions given on the legislation. Exemption from or reduction of payment of customs duty, revenue recurring charge, RRC, ABSD, on the importation of purchase of raw materials, building materials, furniture, fixtures, fittings, appliances, machinery, plant, equipment. They get everything for the use in the construction and the operation of the business. Exemption from or reduction of customs duty, RRC and ABST on importation or purchase of vehicles for use in the operation of the business. And some of them abuse that thing about vehicles, you know. They say it's vehicles for the hotels and buses and pickups. And sometimes, most of the times, it's vehicles for the managers. But we give reduction of property tax in respect of land and buildings used in the operation of the business. But this particular one, the cabinet have decided that we're going to review that. And we're going to have to come back to Parliament because we cannot continue giving hotels zero property tax in this country. We can give them a special rate. Like how we plan, I know Minister Yearwood, we plan to give them a special rate for electricity also. But we can't make it zero rated for property tax. And poor people in this country have to pay their property tax. A little poor man in St. John City South or rural West. Come on. That can't be right. Or in City East, or even in Barbuda. They have to pay property tax, but every single hotel in this country is exempted from property tax. How can that be right? So we're going to review that particular concession. Reduction of stamp duty payable by the purchaser or transferee and by the vendor or transfer of land. We just waived the stamp duties. Now that we wanted to do it for Royal Antigua, St. Nicholas, because finally he sold the hotel and we wanted to get rid of him. Yes. Because he was doing nothing that is a crown jewel in our hotel industry and our hotel stock. And you have cockroaches in the hotel, no staff, no bookings. So finally, through the creativeness of this Gaston Brown administration, the Prime Minister invited Stephen Hunter to go and negotiate and purchase it. And we had to give the concession both for the vendor and the purchaser to waive the stamp duty, and we did it. It's not something we wanted to do. It's close to $1 million between the 7.5 and the 2.5 plus the alien and owning license, Mr. AG. But we did it. So nobody can accuse this government of not being business friendly. Then you have reduction of stamp duty under the Non-Citizens Landholding Regulation Act, exemption from or reduction of withholding tax on dividends, profits, repatriation of profits, and it goes on and on and on, Mr. Speaker. Exemptions under the Income Tax Act for all the directors and managers. And that's just the Antigua and Barbuda Investment Authority concessions. When you go, Mr. Speaker, to the Tourism and Business Special Incentives Act, and we amended it to even extend it, they get concessions, Mr. Speaker, up to 25 years tax holiday. And you know what they do? They go to both acts. They go to the special, and we are going to come back to Parliament, gentlemen, Mr. AG, Mr. Hesse, as your department is being have to have one unified act. Not to have your Tourism and Business Special Incentive Act, then the ABIA Concessions Act, and they go and they choose the concessions from both of them. And they all tell you they're investing 100 million. Every new investor coming, they're investing 100 million. So we give all the concessions. In fact, truth be told, Mr. Bootstrode, when he built the Sanders Grand, before we lost the election in 2004, we gave him the concessions. But he said it's $100 million. You tell me, it's $100 million that hotel costs US? Well, but they said it's $100 million US to get all of the concessions, the 25 years, everything. And most not just Bootstrode do it, to be fair to him. It's all of them do it. They're refurbishing and doing a little refurbishing. We just spoke about one today. They said 15 million, 17 million, just to get the tax concessions. And we have to close an eye, and we grant them. So, Mr. Speaker, the Tourism and Business Special Incentives Act also gives a host of incentives to ensure that our hotels remain competitive, and they receive up to 25 years in certain instances tax holidays with the ability to repatriate all of their profits. So this government has demonstrated that we have bent over backwards. There's nothing wrong with that, to ensure that business can compete and thrive in a competitive global environment. So this nonsense, utter foolishness, that the Honourable Member for All Saints East and St. Luke says, oh, the Cabinet and the Prime Minister said this morning we had to eat humble pie, when the Prime Minister said that the Cabinet bent backward over. Mr. Speaker, yes, we did. And we do so many times. because we have to be reasonable, even humble, when undertaking our roles as responsible elected members of the executive to serve this country and to improve the quality and standard of living of our people. We have to have humility. We have to suspend our own personal inclinations to allow personal hurt if we have our feelings to cloud our decisions. We can never do that. This is not what responsible government is about. So it's nonsense about we eat humble pie. But, Mr. Speaker, getting back to the most critical point, all stakeholders are important. We are countries of laws and a country of order. So the amendments to this bill serves to protect. It serves to build on the rich, solid foundation laid just over 3 years ago by this Gaston Brown administration in the areas of tourism, in the areas of health, in education, in sports, in utilities, in crime, in economic development, in renewable energy. And our actions have now begun to bear fruit. And that is the problem that they're having over there on that side. And as a government, Mr. Speaker, we cannot allow the fruit to be aborted. Cannot. This nation has started to see the tangible deliverables of this Gaston Brown administration, the efforts to improve the working class people and the middle class people of this country, and all the good people of Antigua and Barbuda. And this amendment seeks to ensure that we preserve. We have a fiduciary duty, we have a contract with the people out there. It's like a marriage. When they vote us in, it is a marriage, it is a bond. It is a fiduciary responsibility and duty to them to protect them, to seek to ensure that their lives, which are linked to the employment in the industry, will not be thrown into a tailspin by an ultimately closure of any hotel prior to every single measure being taken to mitigate the negative consequences of hotel closures. And that is the point. That's all this act is seeking to do, is mitigate those negative consequences. So it's not a political issue at all. It's a national issue. And they should rise above partisan politics. Right now, Mr. Speaker, the world faces a high degree of political and economic unpredictability. In the US, the Caribbean region's biggest trading partner and the country from which the largest number of tourists come from. Mr. Speaker, we all know that there's great uncertainty over its future direction. And amid all this, amid all the terrorism in the world, greater pressure is put on the tourism sector to deliver employment, revenues, foreign exchange. So this amendment serves to safeguard the government's revenues from the sector and the employment of all hotel workers in this country. In fact, it is a bipartisan issue that I really had hoped that the opposition and the Antigua and Barbuda Workers Union will support. And Chester Hughes, and what's the other gentleman's name, Mr. Messiah? David Messiah? David Messiah, and join forces with the government to work in the best interests of this country. For Mr. Speaker, I want to just say, following a statement released by my office in summary of a cabinet meeting with Sandals management last week, Wednesday. Please, what date was it?
Wednesday.
It was Wednesday.
19.
The 19th of July. It was the 19th. Please permit me, Mr. Speaker, to respond to issues they raised, and also to refer to a letter from Sandals to Mr. David Messiah, the General Secretary of the Antigua and Barbuda Workers Union, dated the 20th of July, the day immediately after delegation, whole high-powered delegation of Sandals management and lawyers and attorneys. They came at the invitation of us, the cabinet, and they met. But I read, Mr. Speaker, for the benefit of this country to know what their letter said. That letter of 20th of July, and I crave your indulgence. It says here, having enjoyed, well, dear Mr. Messiah, but I'm quoting a paragraph, I'm not going to read the whole letter. Having enjoyed a respectful working relationship with the Antigua and Barbuda Workers Union over the past 25 years, and because of the sincerity of your appeal, our chairman, Dr. the Honorable Gordon Butch Stewart, and the board, upon receiving your request, has been reviewing the original scope of works to identify only the most important areas. Mr. Speaker, it also says, it continues, having enjoyed the 25 years, Mr. Speaker, Sanders saying that they have not enjoyed a respectable relationship with the most important stakeholder, which is the government of Antigua and Barbuda? Are they saying that only the Antigua and Barbuda Workers' Union has been sincere in this matter? Come on, Mr. Speaker. But to add insult to injury, the Sanders delegation, sir, left the cabinet meeting and gave us the assurance, the commitment, that they will send a draft press release for our approval, because we wanted to put out a joint press release of what we agreed to and what we discussed in the cabinet and what we asked them to, which would be jointly issued. And Mr. Speaker, do you know that they reneged on their promise to reply to us? But rather than keep to the commitment that they gave to the Prime Minister, what they did, the very next day they wrote to the union, thanking them, and I quote again, for their level-headedness and responsible approach to this matter. Can you imagine that? The Board of Directors appreciates ABW's intervention and its level-headed and responsible approach to this matter. Well, Mr. Speaker, this is disrespect of the highest degree to a sitting government, to a Prime Minister, and to a cabinet, where Sanders appear to be attributing, and I say appear, by innuendo, attributing to our Prime Minister and his government's defense of the workers and stakeholders in this industry to be irresponsible and not level-headed. It is an insult to us. I'm sure the Prime Minister... Correct. Exact same. Same. It's a conspiracy.
And the same language is also in the AWU release.
Press release. So you could see that Sanders management and ABWU and Chester Hughes colluded, and they want to let the Prime Minister look like if he's irrational and that we are not calm. Use words like calm. Can you imagine that? After we have agreed to give him every single concession in this book? Can you imagine it? Wow. I'm going to get to that, Mr. Prime Minister.
And we're going to have to really toughen up. We have to start to put people in prison. Maybe we need to put some of these hoteliers and notice if they continue to rob their revenue, we put them in jail.
Yeah.
That's right.
It appears, Mr. Prime Minister, I'm going to deal with that. I hope the Speaker can give me as much time as he gave the member. He gave her our 30 minutes. Mr. Speaker, it appears that Sanders...
You take all the time you want.
Thank you, sir.
If you feel you have to take an hour and a half,
I will not. I hope not.
just don't
I may
repeat
need more than an
yourself.
hour, but not an hour and a half. We have other speakers. We have the former Minister of Tourism and the Minister of Education and the Prime Minister have to wrap up. Mr. Speaker, it appears that Sanders, after all these years of enjoying a good relationship with the government, by these innuendos is willing to now only acknowledge the union as the only responsible and level-headed stakeholder in the industry. It appears that the certain senior union officials, we all know who they are, they're well compromised by some hoteliers, and I say some hoteliers. I am not accusing Sanders. I want to make myself lucidly clear, as Lester would say, of anything, but I know of certain hoteliers in this country, certain prominent hoteliers, and you know them too. Some of them are your very good friends, who these senior union executives, they receive sponsorships every year for all of their football clubs. And they're willing to sell the workers down the river. Down the river, they receive brown paper bags every month too. Oh, you know about it, Mr. Prime Minister?
Honorable member,
Yes, sir.
be careful.
Okay, sir. But I'm saying, Charles,
Please do not speak to the matter or accuse persons of organizations
well, no, not
of
organization.
offenses
Okay, sir.
for which they can be imprisoned.
Thank you, sir.
It's against the standing order.
Okay, sir. Good point. Everybody know one of them sitting in the Senate, right? Senate. I would like to make it clear though, that I don't receive any brown paper bags. Thank God that I don't need no brown paper bags from any hotel here. Thank God. I'm blessed.
Yes, I.
And you more than me. So it would never cause me, Mr. Speaker, to compromise my integrity in always standing up for the truth. Let me say on the record, I'm a personal friend of Butchford. I respect him. I like him for many years. I met him going back from the days of Lester Bird and Malvin Joseph and Robin Yearwood when he came to build the first sandals and you were the minister. Sandals, in their response to me, also took issue, hand it to me, with reference to the non-payment of ABST, which had been collected and not paid to the Treasury of Antigua and Barbuda.
Yeah, I'm giving it out.
And I quote, Mr. Speaker, in their letter, Prime Minister, I don't know if you notice, the innuendo, they're threatening to sue me. Because they say, and I quote, is about the ABST, similar statements has been made by others and has been repeated too often for Sandals to ignore and will be dealt with as a separate issue. End of quote. Oh, Mr. Prime Minister, I say Sandals is threatening to sue me for speaking truth. Well, if so, my response is bring it on, baby. Bring it on. Because I know, yes, it would involve the release. And it will involve some very sensitive information, not just from Inland Revenue, but also Social Security. The PM referenced it. But Mr. Speaker, let me get to the important matter about ABST. There was a deed of settlement with the Inland Revenue. And I would like to speak to the issue of the old agreement that Sanders had signed with the former UPP administration. Because, Mr. Speaker, I have it here. This agreement that was signed, dated the 2nd day of December 2013, where, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister of the then UPP administration and his Minister of Tourism and his Minister of Finance, they waived every single conceivable tax, including a reduction of the ABST for sandals. Look at the agreement here, and I'll give you a copy of it. Mr. Speaker, it was signed by Baldwin Spencer. I wish he was here so I could remind him, lest we forget. The agreement dated the 2nd day of December 2013, and isn't it very conspicuous, Mr. Prime Minister, that this agreement was dated the 2nd day of December 2013, and elections was in March 2014. And the previous one too? I say no more, sir. So you figure that out when you're accusing us over here of corruption. Well, and she's accusing us. Look to that side. Mr. Speaker, Mr. James Guthrie, Queen's Counsel of 3 Hare Court, gave the following opinion. And I have the opinion here from Mr. Guthrie. It says, subject to any such regulations, this is very, very important. The subject to any such regulations having been made and published, put before the House, etc., the grant of concessions under Section 16 of the Finance Administration Act would therefore have been unlawful and ultra vires as being beyond the minister's statutory powers to grant remissions of tax. Can I repeat that? Being unlawful and ultra vires as being beyond the minister's statutory powers to grant remissions of tax. It continues. However, the grants were made in general terms. And, Mr. Speaker, the advance and the amount of 50,000 in an Antiguan statute must mean EC dollars, not US dollars. It is therefore obvious that the limit was to be exceeded. So he continues, Mr. Guthrie, this apparent illegality goes further than a reduction in the rate of ABST for Grand Pineapple. It affects all the tax concessions set out in the second section, which these are lumped together in the certification letters of the 10th of June, 2014. The first subsidiary question arising, I will make it available to you, under the terms of the agreement, whether the tax concessions granted by the agreement are dependent upon Sandals' compliance with its obligation to develop the Grand Pineapple. It continues, the consequence, in my opinion, is that under the agreement, Sandals are not yet entitled to account for ABST at the reduced rate of 35%. How much clearer you want that? He says the consequence, in my opinion, is that under the agreement, Sandals are not yet entitled to account for ABST at the reduced rate of 35% under item 8A in respect of hotel room rates at Grand Pineapple, and must account for the ABST at 12.5%. That is the capped rate under item 8C. Mr. Speaker, he continues, my instructions say that there has yet been no development of the Grand Pineapple site, whatever, and that Grand Pineapple simply continues to operate as before. I suspect, however, that these are less significant questions, given that, as I advise, the use by Minister Lovell of Section 16 of the Finance Administration Act was ultra vires. I will make the entire opinion available to you. Ultra vires.
We'll give it to you.
Yes. If we forgive Lovell, for you, doesn't matter for you. Oh, now she know that? Yes.
He'll give you a copy there.
Of course I'll give her a copy. If I read anything in the Parliament, I'm obliged to give a copy.
Look at the schedule we just got there.
Where's the schedule? Could you give me, Mr. Yearwood? No. So, Mr.
You want to read that directly? I just got a preliminary an analysis.
Mr. Prime Minister, I have this right here, sir. I'm going to deal with that. I'm well prepared.
Oh, you have it?
I have it right here, sir. I did it. I have dug it up from my files. You know, I'm the Minister of Records, sir. And in fact, I have more details than that.
No, that one is just found, you know.
I know. I'm saying that I have it, sir. I have it in the actual letter and the memo from the Commissioner. It's the same thing.
That's the old one.
Yes, but it explains.
It's something new they found.
Okay, all right. But I'm going to go back to the old one too and juxtapose it to this. But it says, hello, Prime Minister. Sandals operates 2 hotels under the names of Andrew E. Holman, Sandals Grand and Raybury Limited, Sandals New Section. In 2017, Raybury Limited, Sandals New Section continued to utilize the 50% credit granted to the company, so no payment was received for the period January. No, this is new. You're right. I don't have this. I apologize. I have the old one. In 2017, well, let me take my time and read it in a Minister. Stop disturbing. In 2017, Raybury Limited, Sandals New Section continued to utilize the 50% credit granted to the company, so no payment was received for the period January to May 2017. Wow. I'm shocked. In 2017, the Commissioner in Revenue. In 2017, Andrew E. Holmes, Sandals Grant paid the monthly amounts due in full because the 50% credit that was granted to the company was used up in January 2017. The amount paid January, they have $388,280, February $315. The total was $1,508,854.98. For the period January to December 2016, Raybury Limited, Sandals New Section collected $6.6 million, $6,670,000, but they paid, but the tax paid was zero.
Accounting manipulation.
This was done to the fact, this was due to the fact that the taxpayer accumulated excess credits because they were reporting a significantly reduced output tax. Due to the concession afforded to them in a certificate of 20th of January 2009. That certificate was signed by my very dear friend. I must speak the truth. He's my friend, Dr. Eric Court. For the period, he was Minister of Finance. For the period January to December 2016, Andrew E. Holmes Limited, Sandals Grant collected $2,339,472, but the tax paid was $0. This was due to the fact that the taxpayer accumulated excess credits because they were reporting a significantly reduced output tax due to the concession afforded to them in a certificate of 20th of January 2019.
$50 million reported
Wow.
Only hit one. 50%, 12.5% of 50 million, 6.2 million US. What's what is going on?
But Mr. Prime Minister, you recall,
$50 million US
yes,
sales.
you recall though, in March 27th, sir, may I add, Mr. Prime Minister, in March the 27th, 2017, let me just remind you, the Commissioner in Revenue wrote to you, March of this year, on the same issue. And he said, issue of sandals carrying, you spoke a little bit about it today, issue of sandals carrying forward credits of ABST from a date prior to the 1st of January 2017. And he says, on or about, and I quote, the 5th of December 2016, Inland Revenue Commissioner and taxpayer, being the three companies known together, Sandals Resort, executed a deed of release. And I have the deed of release here, which I will refer to a little later, in respect of unpaid ABST payments arising out of a certificate dated 20th of January 2009. This released the taxpayer, I have a lot of information, so I can't go so slow, but this released the taxpayer from some $101,424,448.54. $101.4 million is what this deed of release released them. We agreed to that. So that did we agreed, our cabinet agreed, Ralph Warner. We agreed to this, dated the 5th day of December 2016. So you can't say we're unreasonable with Sandals or we're punitive. We forgave them $101 million. And I will quote from the deed of release.
You're going to provide the opposition?
Yes, I will, but I'm not finished. Robin, you're disturbing me. You're taking up my time. On the 28th day of February 2017, the taxpayer submitted returns for the period of January 1st to the 31st of 27, which included credits, and the Prime Minister spoke about this, brought forward in the aggregate amount of $5,294,674. And the Commissioner goes on to say the total input tax claim has not been verified, however. A substantial portion is due to ABSD paid on management fees charged to Andrew E. Holmes Limited, management fees, and to Webury Limited, and Dickerson Bay Hotel Management. And you know what the Prime Minister did? The Prime Minister came to Cabinet, let me refresh our memories, colleagues, and he said, in the interest of peace, Mr. Butchroth have asked to carry forward these losses, these tax credits, and let us waive it. And the Cabinet turned it down bluntly. And the Prime Minister said, gentlemen, let us do it. We want to move forward, and lady, we want to get a clean slate with Sandals. Let us give them 50% as a compromise. And reluctantly, and the Prime Minister wants his cabinet by consensus. We agreed. So who can say that the Prime Minister been unreasonable in these instances?
It's 100%.
It's 100% we gave them?
Yeah.
No, it's 50. They asked for 100. We gave them 50. Correct.
So they got $104 million right now.
101.4 million plus the 2 point, right, 104. So, the taxpayer accumulated excess credits. This is not Gaston Brown saying this, This is the Commissioner in the Revenue. And I'm quoting from the letter to the Prime Minister. The taxpayer accumulated excess credits because they were reporting a significantly reduced output tax due to the arrangement afforded them in the certificate of 20th of January 2009. So they reported reduced output tax. But the Commissioner is saying that the assessed liability of $101.4 million spanned the tax period from January 2009 to September 2016 is inclusive of penalties and interest, and we write that off completely. He continues, the established liability for the stated period outweighed any credit.
DNA, you understand?
The established liability for the stated period outweighed any credit that the taxpayer had for that said period. It is impossible to have an excess credit and a tax debt simultaneously for the same period, as the tax payable to the Commissioner of Inland Revenue is calculated by subtracting the input tax claim from the output tax reported. So he said it is impossible. In his position, and he's very strong with it, he says, strictly speaking, Mr. Prime Minister, can you listen?
Got you talking.
But of course, if
Of course we did. Mr. Speaker, let me finish, man. You had your time, I didn't disturb you.
Well, you have,
But I would like not to be disturbed.
let speak to me.
But you let her speak?
Speak
Over
to
me.
me. You're on the floor, she's not. While I'm on it, I expect sight and possession of that letter, you know. Yeah,
Of course, Mr. Speaker, all of the documents I have here,
Thank you,
I've
sir.
labeled the files and they'll
That
be
in
presented
particular.
to you.
That one.
To the Parliament, to give everybody.
Mr. Speaker, I continue with the conclusion of this letter. Strictly speaking, the taxpayer should not be allowed any credit brought forward at all. Item 2 in the deed of release, Item 2 in the deed of release clearly says, and I quote, Mr. Speaker, now this deed witnesses, you lawyers know that legal language under the section states, that Sandals shall be paid ABST at the full statutory rate as of January the 1st, 2017, and hereby waives from that date any right that they may have to a discounted rate of ABST under the said certificate dated January 20th, 2009. Can I repeat that for the benefit, not of you, you are legal luminary, but for the public? Strictly speaking, the taxpayer should not be allowed any credit brought forward at all. The 2nd day of December 2013, where, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister of the then UPP administration and his Minister of Tourism and his Minister of Finance, they waived every single conceivable tax, including a reduction of the ABST for sandals. Look at the agreement here, and I'll give you a copy of it. Mr. Speaker, it was signed by Baldwin Spencer. I wish he was here so I could remind him, lest we forget. The agreement dated the 2nd day of December 2013, and isn't it very conspicuous, Mr. Prime Minister, that this agreement was dated the 2nd day of December 2013, and elections was in March 2014. And the previous one too? I say no more, sir. So you figure that out when you're accusing us over here of corruption.
Just in one election, gets a new concession back.
Well, and she's accusing us. Look to that side. Mr. Speaker, Mr. James Guthrie, Queen's Counsel of 3 Hare Court, gave the following opinion. And I have the opinion here from Mr. Guthrie. It says, subject to any such regulations, this is very, very important. The subject to any such regulations having been made and published, put before the House, etc., the grant of concessions under Section 16 of the Finance Administration Act would therefore have been unlawful and ultra vires as being beyond the minister's statutory powers to grant remissions of tax. Can I repeat that? Being unlawful and ultra vires as being beyond the minister's statutory powers to grant remissions of tax. It continues. However, the grants were made in general terms. And, Mr. Speaker, the advance and the amount of 50,000 in an Antiguan statute must mean EC dollars, not US dollars. It is therefore obvious that the limit was to be exceeded. So he continues, Mr. Guthrie, this apparent illegality goes further than a reduction in the rate of ABST for Grand Pineapple. It affects all the tax concessions set out in the 2nd section, which these are lumped together in the certification letters of the 10th of June, 2014. The first subsidiary question arising, I will make it available to you, under the terms of the agreement, whether the tax concessions granted by the agreement are dependent upon Sandals' compliance with its obligation to develop the Grand Pineapple. It continues, the consequence, in my opinion, is that under the agreement, Sandals are not yet entitled to account for ABST at the reduced rate of 35%. How much clearer you want that? He says the consequence, in my opinion, is that under the agreement, Sandals are not yet entitled to account for ABST at the reduced rate of 35% under item 8A in respect of hotel room rates at Grand Pineapple, and must account for the ABST at 12.5%. That is the capped rate under item 8C. Mr. Speaker, he continues, my instructions say that there has yet been no development of the Grand Pineapple site, whatever, and that Grand Pineapple simply continues to operate as before. I suspect, however, that these are less significant questions, given that as I advise, the use by Minister Lovell of Section 16 of the Finance Administration Act was ultra vires. I will make the entire opinion available to you. Ultra vires.
We'll give it to you.
Yes. If we forgive Lovell, for you, doesn't matter for you. Oh, now she know that? Yes.
He'll give you a copy there.
Of course I'll give her a copy. If I read anything in the Parliament, I'm obliged to give a copy.
Look at the schedule we just got here.
Where's the schedule? Could you give me, Mr. Yearwood? No. So, Mr.
You want to read that directly? I just got an analysis.
Mr. Prime Minister, I have this right here, sir. I'm going to deal with that. I'm well prepared.
Oh, you have it?
I have it right here, sir. I did it. I have dug it up from my files. You know, I'm the Minister of Records, sir. And in fact, I have more details than that.
No, that one is just found, you know.
I know. I'm saying that I have it, sir. I have it in the actual letter and the memo from the Commissioner. It's the same thing.
That's the old one.
Yes, but it explains.
It's something new they found.
Okay, all right. But I'm going to go back to the old one too and juxtapose it to this. But it says, hello, Prime Minister. Sandals operates 2 hotels under the names of Andrew E. Holmes, Sandals Grand and Raybury Limited, Sandals New Section. In 2017, Raybury Limited Sandals New Section continued to utilize the 50% credit granted to the company, so no payment was received for the period January. No, this is new. You're right. I don't have this. I apologize. I have the old one. In 2017, well, let me take my time and read it in a minister. Stop disturbing. In 2017, Raybury Limited Sandals New Section continued to utilize the 50% credit granted to the company. So no payment was received for the period January to May 2017. Wow. I'm shocked. In 2017, the Commissioner in Revenue. In 2017, Andrew E. Holmes, Sandals Grant paid the monthly amounts due in full because the 50% credit that was granted to the company was used up in January 2017. The amount paid January, they have $388,280, February 315. The total was $1,508,854.98. For the period January to December 2016, Raybury Limited Sandals New Section collected $6.6 million, $6,670,000, but they paid, but the tax paid was zero.
Accounting manipulation.
This was due to the fact that the taxpayer accumulated excess credits because they were reporting a significantly reduced output tax. Due to the concession afforded to them in a certificate of 20th of January 2009. That certificate was signed by my very dear friend. I must speak the truth. He's my friend, Dr. Eric Court. For the period, he was Minister of Finance. For the period January to December 2016, Andrew E. Holmes Limited Sandals Grant collected $2,339,472, but the tax paid was $0. This was due to the fact that the taxpayer accumulated excess credits because they were reporting a significantly reduced output tax due to the concession afforded to them in a certificate of 20th of January 2019.
$50 million. Reported sales.
Wow.
50%, 12.5% of 50 million, 6.2 million US. That's what is going on.
But Mr. Prime Minister, you recall,
$50 million US
yes,
sales.
you recall though, in March 27th, sir, may I add, Mr. Prime Minister, in March the 27th, 2017, let me just remind you, the Commissioner in Revenue wrote to you, March of this year, on the same issue. And he said, issue of sandals carrying, you spoke a little bit about it today, issue of sandals carrying forward credits of ABST from a date prior to the 1st of January 2017. And it says, on or about, and I quote, the 5th of December 2016, Inland Revenue Commission and taxpayer, being the three companies known together as Sanders Resort, executed a deed of release. And I have the deed of release here, which I will refer to a little later, in respect of unpaid ABST payments arising out of a certificate dated 20th of January 2009. This released the taxpayer, I have a lot of information, so I can't go so slow, but this released the taxpayer from some $101,424,448.54. $101.4 million is what this deed of release released them. We agreed to that. So that we agreed, our cabinet agreed, Ralph Warner. We agreed to this, dated the 5th day of December 2016. So you can't say we're unreasonable with Sandals or we're punitive. We forgave them $101 million. And I will quote from the deed of release.
You're going to provide the opposition?
Yes, I will, but I'm not finished. When you disturb him, you're taking up my time. On the 28th day of February 2017, the taxpayer submitted returns for the period of January 1st to the 31st of 27, which included credits, and the Prime Minister spoke about this, brought forward in the aggregate amount of $5,294,674. And the Commissioner goes on to say the total input tax claim has not been verified, however. A substantial portion is due to ABST paid on management fees charged to Andrew E. Holmes Limited, management fees, and to Webury Limited, and Dickerson Bay Hotel Management. And you know what the Prime Minister did? The Prime Minister came to Cabinet, let me refresh our memories, colleagues, and he said, in the interest of peace, Mr. Butch would have asked to carry forward these losses, these tax credits, and let us waive it. And the Cabinet turned it down bluntly. And the Prime Minister said, gentlemen, let us do it. We want to move forward, and lady, we want to get a clean slate with Sandals. Let us give them 50% as a compromise. And reluctantly, and the Prime Minister wants his Cabinet by consensus. We agreed. So who can say that the Prime Minister been unreasonable in these instances?
It's 100%.
It's 100% we gave them?
Yeah.
No, it's 50. They asked for 100. We gave them 50. Correct.
So they got $104 million right now.
$101.4 million. Plus the 2 point, right, 104. So, the taxpayer accumulated excess credits. This is not Gaston Brown saying this, you know. This is the Commission in the Revenue. And I'm quoting from the letter to the Prime Minister. The taxpayer accumulated excess credits because they were reporting a significantly reduced output tax due to the arrangement afforded them in the certificate of 20th of January 2009. So they reported reduced output tax. But the Commissioner is saying that the assessed liability of $101.4 million spanned the tax period from January 2009 to September 2016 is inclusive of penalties and interest, and we write that off completely. He continues, the established liability for the stated period outweighed any credit.
You understand?
The established liability for the stated period outweighed any credit that the taxpayer had for that said period. It is impossible to have an excess credit and a tax debt simultaneously for the same period, as the tax payable to the Commission of Inland Revenue is calculated by subtracting the input tax claim from the output tax reported. So he said it is impossible in his position, and he's very strong with it. He says, strictly speaking, Mr. Prime Minister, can you listen?
Got to talk.
Of course we did. Mr. Speaker, let me finish, man. You had your time, I didn't disturb you.
Well, you have...
But I would like not to be disturbed.
Let speak to me.
But you let her speak?
Speak
Over
to
me.
me. You're on the floor. She's not. While I'm on it, I expect sight and possession of that letter, you know. Yeah,
Of course, Mr. Speaker, all of the documents I have here,
Thank you,
I've
sir.
labeled the files and they'll
That
be
in
presented
particular.
to you.
That one.
To the Parliament, to give everybody.
Mr. Speaker, I continue with the conclusion of this letter. Strictly speaking, the taxpayer should not be allowed any credit brought forward at all. Item 2 in the deed of release, item 2 in the deed of release clearly says, and I quote, Mr. Speaker, "Now this deed witnesses," you lawyers know that legal language under the section states, "that Sandals shall be paid ABSD at the full statutory rate as of January the 1st, 2017, and hereby waives from that date any right that they may have to a discounted rate of ABSD under the said certificate dated January 20th, 2009. Can I repeat that for the benefit, not of you, you are legal luminary, but for the public? Strictly speaking, the taxpayer should not be allowed any credit brought forward at all.